no entrepreneur makes it alone. Having great people allows me, the entrepreneur, to build trust in the process. You've heard so many people, and prior to jumping on, we talked about having coaches. I remember a long time ago talking to someone and being frustrated about how slow things are moving, right? Because when you're growing fast, you hire people. Well, that slows down the process a little bit. And the question I was asked, well, the outcome is the same. Then why do you care so much? Trust the process. And I never understood what that meant, but to some degree, it comes down to the people running the process. And oftentimes, I'll learn about an issue that maybe took place in the past or an opportunity that came up, and I'm thinking, well, tell me the punchline. What happened? What did we do? And I learned that the team would have solved the problem better than I would have. And so those moments allow me to trust the process. But more importantly, the people is what drives me to be able to trust the process. And so,
welcome to Grow Think Tank. This is the one and only place where you will get insight from the founders and the CEOs of the fastest growing privately held companies. I am the host. My name is Gene Hammett. I help leaders and their teams navigate the defining moments of their growth. Are you ready to grow?
Today we look about the importance of having great people. Your company wouldn't be where it is today without your people. And you wouldn't be in a place of success and leadership without having the people around you. So we're going to look at hiring the great people. We're going to also look at retaining great people in today's conversation with our special guest, Omar Jordan. He is the founder CEO of Coviance. They are a leading our lender platform that really tries to make it more efficient for lenders and for those that are trying to get loans and home equity lines on their mortgages. All that to be said, today we talk about the importance of having great people. One of the things you'll find interesting in this is Omar talks about the importance of transparency. Now, he will mention it maybe a dozen times. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not much, because transparency seems to be something that he feels like is very important to the culture, to trust inside the organization. And we talk about it quite a bit through today's organization. You'll also find out a little bit more about how to hire and retain top talent in your company. My name is Gene Hammett. I'm an executive coach. We have a company called Core Elevation that does leadership development. And what we really enjoy doing is helping companies continue to scale and grow to that next level. And what you have to realize, if you don't already, is that what got you here may not get you to that next level of growth. If you're going from 10 million to 20 million, or 20 million to 50 million, or 50 million to 100 million, it takes some new thinking and some new approaches. And today is your chance to dive into that. If you want a more specific kind of path to really understanding what's getting in the way of your growth, the friction, if you will, or resistance, then I offer a chance to sit down with me and talk about your business, to see where you are, see what struggles you're facing, and actually develop a plan for you. And that plan will really be really helpful. If you're curious about that, all you have to do is go to send me an email, gene@genehammett.com. And if you want to join a conversation with other executives at fast growth companies, then you're going to go to coreelevation.com/virtual conversations. We have multiple of those. Actually, we only have one a month, but we have multiple throughout the year, different topics. The next one coming up is about leading Gen Z. So if you're curious about that, just go to coreelevation.com/virtual conversations. You can read about it and join us if you want. It's absolutely free. And now here's the interview with Omar. Omar, how are you?
hi, how are you? Excellent. Great weekend coming off of that, and here we are. How are you?
I am fantastic. We're going to talk about having great people and the impact that has in our organizations and our performance. But before we get there, Omar, tell us a little bit about your company, Coviance.
Well, thank you, number one, for having me. Appreciate it. Excited to be on your show. Hear so much about it. Coviance was started, well, we rebranded to Coviance a couple of years ago. And prior to that, it was Lender Close. And I started the company on the idea to help provide efficiency and automation for a lot of lenders, specifically on the real estate and home equity side. What most people don't know when they go apply for a home equity loan or a real estate loan is that the process on the back end is extremely convoluted. Requires so much busy work, so much data. And there are vendors and industry providers that help lenders make sense of the data. But to put all of that into one platform and inject it behind an automation engine allows lenders to really provide far more efficiencies for their processes, and therefore that translate to the borrower experience, right? Because that's what matters at the end of the day.
Well, I'm kind of curious, given interest rates have changed and housing, prices are, still staying up there because of inventories. What do you
Yep.
think is the future of your industry over the next 3 years?
Well, it's kind of been fun to watch actually, and we predicted a lot of what's happening. Interest rates have been historically low to almost 0% in some cases, and so you really don't see a lot of that happen very often. So we knew that rates were going to start to rise at some point. Well, what happens when interest rates start to rise? People's cash flow starts to shrink, as you're feeling today with the inflation being high. A credit card balance that's at $10,000 now, the payment on that before interest were higher was about, say, $300 to $400 a month. Well, now the payment on that $10,000 balance is $700 a month. So that just gives today's borrower, the average American, a lot of pressure on what's happening from day to day. We start to see people living paycheck to paycheck. And what's really telling is that we as a country have more unsecured debt than we had back in 2005. That's prior to the previous economical collapse. Now, I don't think we're going to have an event like we had back in the Great Recession, or the recession that we had in 2007. But I think we are going to start to see a tremendous amount of focus on debt consolidation. And so what happens in that case? Well, if I have a house loan, a first mortgage that's at 3.2% fixed interest rate, and today's interest rates on the first mortgages are 6.5%, 7%, I'm likely not going to touch that. I'm going to focus on maybe getting a home equity loan, right, to consolidate my debt. And that's the space we play in. So whether we played our cards right or we built our technology the right way, we've done a good job of paying attention to what's happening to the market and where it's going and building around that. So I'm optimistic about the next 2 to 3 years for as far as real estate transactions and what's going to happen with it. We're going to see rates come down. To your questions, what's going to happen? We're going to see rates come down probably in the next year or so. That's going to allow us to see a lot more activities around purchases and maybe some refinances. But my prediction is that home equity lending is going to be here to stay for at least 5 to 7 years.
Well, I appreciate you giving us that insight there. Omar, we came here not to talk about the lending experience as much as you would love to probably talk about it all day long. But we want to talk about, what really has catapulted your company to the growth that it is. And I know we've done research. We've talked with you. We've talked with looking at the website, what's online. You talked about having great people is such a critical element of growth. What do you mean by having great people?
Well, it's probably the most critical part of building a company. It's no entrepreneur makes it alone. Having great people allows me, the entrepreneur, to build trust in the process. You've heard so many people, and prior to jumping on, we talked about having coaches. I remember a long time ago talking to someone and being frustrated about how slow things are moving, right? Because when you're growing fast, you hire people. Well, that slows down the process a little bit. And the question I was asked, well, if the outcome is the same, then why do you care so much? Trust the process. And I never understood what that meant. But to some degree, it comes down to the people running the process. And oftentimes, I'll learn about an issue that maybe took place in the past or an opportunity that came up, and I'm thinking, well, tell me the punchline. What happened? What did we do? And I learned that the team would have solved the problem better than I would have. And so those moments allow me to trust the process. But more importantly, the people is what drives me to be able to trust the process. And so I think having great people is essential to growth, essential to managing a business, and it really allows the entrepreneur some breathing room too, so that you can now focus on building creative customers, investors, right? Versus being in the business constantly. Working on the business versus in the business is what having great people means.
Omar, I want to break this up into two components, and I'm sure we could probably slice it even more granular, but hiring and keeping those great people. Hiring, what have you learned about the process of hiring great people that others maybe haven't learned yet?
It's not an easy journey, and it is a journey, and it's a balance too. You sometimes you hire someone because you think they're able to do it and they've never done it before, right? They have the credentials to do it. They were maybe at a big corporation and have been able to scale a team and so on. But to operate in a startup environment is radically different than maybe running, you know, 5,000 plus employee company. The strategies that we talk about and the level of execution and how fast we have to move sometimes is uncomfortable for folks that are maybe have a background of Wells Fargo, for example, or you think about IBM. These are companies that have been in place for a very long time, have the process baked, and all you have to do is plug in and go. Well, in a startup, it's a mountain, it's a valley, and it happens on a daily basis. And your number one objective is focus on growth, and that's revenue growth, customer growth, and then culture is a big thing. And part of why a lot of people leave that corporate concept and come into a startup is a focus on culture and the ability to be able to create something with a group of people to move the business forward. So it is definitely a journey. It's a coin flip in a lot of ways too. You think you have the person, but you don't. And then I think it comes down to allowing people to fail, right? Allowing them to be able to create within a certain perimeter. And then lastly is transparency for me. And we can dive into that too as we go into the conversation. I just don't want to keep talking on this question. I want to allow you to give me another question on that.
Sure. I'm curious. Do you have a favorite interview question that gets to the heart of whether someone is a fit for your company, or maybe you
Yeah, I
have
think
a bunch of questions?
it's not necessarily an interview question. It's primarily the style of question. When I'm talking to someone, I try to tell them all the problems we have. Why? Because I want to try to talk them out of the job. And part of that process is it allows them to really, number one, transparency for me is the way I lead. But they know exactly what they're getting into. I'm very transparent on my expectations and how I lead as well. But I need people that are able to defend themselves in the kitchen. I always say that if you're going to sit at my kitchen table, you got to be able to defend yourself. And we're going to have some tough conversations because yes, I'm hiring you to run the role, and I'm hiring you to run a division, for example, if we're talking at a leadership side. But we're going to have some tough conversations, and you're going to have to convince me why your way is better than my way, right? And that's what makes it fun. But just, I think that's what it is for me. And again, it's talking to people, transparency, telling them what the problem is, and try to talk them out of a job and see how they work their way back in.
Now, Omar mentioned that he tries to talk them out of a job. That may sound counterintuitive, but actually he's right on track with something. The experience that we've seen across more than 100 companies that are hiring the right people and making sure that they retain those people over time is to make sure you clearly articulate why this job is going to be difficult, why it could be hard. Because if they're not up for that challenge, you'd rather them bow out early, because that doesn't cost you very much. But if they get plugged into the organization and they stay 2 weeks or 2 months and they never really perform on what you want them to do because they're always ramping up, that's very, very expensive. It may cost you $5,000 or $10,000, not counting the salaries and whatnot. That's just everyone else's time. But it could cost you $20,000, $30,000 just to bring someone on board. So when you are doing the work to repel them, in fact, we actually did a project like this with a client where they had turnover in one particular job function. Customer service representatives was astronomical. And so we were able to reduce that by, went from 97% attrition to 11.4% attrition in about a 3-month period. All because we did 2 things. One of them is we appropriately repelled the right people, and the second thing is we did a skills test that also repelled people that weren't that didn't have the basic skills to be able to do this job. And so if you do those 2 things, figure out what they are for each role, you can actually hire better. So I go through a little bit of detail here because there's such an important piece to having great people is hiring right. So just wanted to share that with you today. Back to Omar. You mentioned something about tough conversations. It's probably one of my favorite topics. Maybe it's because I'm writing a book about it, and I'm really excited to share that with the world. And we're still working on it. So if anyone who's listening in, be patient. I know I've been mentioning it for months, but it takes a long time to write a book that's meaningful. What's your best advice on tough conversations for other leaders?
A lot of people are afraid of having the first part of the tough conversation, which is sitting down and having a tough conversation. I think what I learned, and this happened to me back in the past. Again, I reported to many leaders, and I remember one of them specifically said to me when I first took the job was, "Listen, we're going to have some tough conversation, but we're going to leave that room and we're going to talk about the football game, or we're going to high five about what you did the week before, or we're going to talk about what we're doing this weekend." But tough conversations is part of the journey. You have to have them. Otherwise, it builds a lack of trust. It builds friction. It builds a lot more unhealthy dialogue or unhealthy feelings that you might have towards someone. And so I like to talk about what's happening right here and right here. I like to discuss it, and I like to put it all on the table, and that allows me to move forward. So if you ask me what kind of advice I would give someone, I would say get comfortable with having tough conversation. You have to have tough conversations. Even at home with your kids, with your spouse, with your partner, you have to have those tough conversations. As long as you do it respectfully, and you're transparent, pragmatic about it, and non-emotional, then it makes the conversation easy, and you'll feel so much better when it's done. If the feeling beyond that is priceless.
So I think we're in alignment with this. What we're doing is me and my wife are writing the book on tough conversations, and we're making it more actionable than the other books in the marketplace, more,
Yeah.
framework based and more supportive, to prepare for those conversations. Because I think a lot of people's the reason why they are afraid is because they don't know how to actually give one effectively. So all
Yeah.
those listening in can listen to that. Omar, we started talking about having great people, which is a part of the solution for sure. We talked about hiring. Now let's talk about maintaining the great people in your team. Like, what does it take in today's marketplace where there's lots of opportunities out there to really keep the people that are talented?
That's a great question. I think about that all the time. And in fact, I take it somewhat seriously, and I take my credibility and my leadership team's credibility very, very seriously. I said somewhat, but very, very seriously, because it matters. At the end of the day, in a previous conversation you and I just had, we talked about building trust, me building trust with my team. Well, that has to also be the other way around. And so in order for me to keep my team engaged, whether at the leadership level or not at the leadership level, I have to make sure that they feel every role we have, Gene, is very important to the company. The role is important to the company. The question is, are you the one for that role? So we have a lot of those conversations internally in a healthy way. But the number one thing, I can't tell you how many times I've worked for other leaders where transparency wasn't there. So I was working towards something I didn't know why. And to me, being a startup, it's so important for us to be so transparent with our team. And so that bridges that gap, right, between leadership and employees. So my door is always wide open. Anybody can always walk in and challenge or ask me a question about a decision that I made. Why? Why did we have to do this? Why do I have to report to this person? Why is it that you hired that person? And allowing the team to run those divisions, or run their entire, teammates, or cooperate in a collaborative way, and me out of the way, gives them the ability to build that trust within them. And by the way, trust takes a long time. I was talking to a friend of mine who's a CFO at a company for 3 years, and he was telling me how it took him 3 years to be able to build trust between this person and that person, because you have to have a lot more than just meetings. It's all about shared experiences and shared wins and shared failures, and those are the things that builds the character of a team.
We're wrapping up today, Omar, and we've been talking about having great people, but I'm just curious about what leadership principles guide you to be the leader that you think is necessary for your company's success.
Well, I genuinely love to fail. I don't know if that's a curse or not, but I just love to make mistakes, as long as I'm not putting the company out of business. And I try to instill a lot of that into my team, allowing them to have enough runway to make mistakes. And when they do, we sit down and we talk about it. What happened? What went wrong? What could we have done differently? And you learn a lot about each other. You learn a lot about your customers. You learn a lot about your capabilities as well. And so that's the number one thing for me is don't be afraid to fail. And then number two is transparency. I keep going back to it. That's the number one. That's so important. The way I run my board, the way I talk to my investors, the way I talk to my employees, my staff. It's all around the why, how much money we have, what are we going to invest in, how much am I going to raise. Very, very transparent when it comes to that. And that's how you build trust. It's very, very simple.
Now, Omar said something about love to fail. And I got a smile coming over my mouth when I see this because I don't think everyone loves to fail. I don't love to fail. I will tell you that. I don't love it. But I do know it's the pathway to growth. I do know that every time the feedback comes in, not as expected, it wasn't a success, it wasn't a win, it wasn't what we wanted, that we learn from that and we grow. And that's how many organizations are growing and scaling. They're learning at a faster pace. They are learning from those failures. They're willing to engage in them. They're willing to try things, and they get their employees to try things. And it really does take the right kind of leadership to encourage people to fail, and that it's okay and safe to fail as long as we're learning from it, as long as we're not doing the same thing over and over and over, and that we are treating this as we would in our own company. It really is a part of that entrepreneur spirit inside the organization, is to be okay with that feedback of failure or it not working out, and learning from it and keep moving forward. Marketing is really essentially that. It's just, you're going to fail 9 times out of 10, and 1 time is going to be successful. And all of the times, all of the success is paid for all those failures. The one winner pays for all the failures. And if you think about that, that is a really good example of why we should embrace failure and get our employees to understand failure is important to our success of our companies. Back to Omar. I talk to a lot of leaders who, they know the importance of transparency. You've mentioned it a dozen times today, and I say that with a smile because a lot of the conversations come back to transparency on this podcast. But how do you get others to be transparent when it's not natural to them? Because it's not just your transparency, it's all of the executive people you have, and even the managers that are running on the front lines developing their teams. How do you get them to be transparent when it's not as natural as it comes for you?
Yeah, it's a constant conversation, and sometimes we're actually sitting in a room, and that just happened recently, where we're saying we need to go to share with the team why we're doing this, and somebody said, "Well, whoa, 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 that's too much. Do they need to know that?" And I said, "Yes, because they have to know what is it that they're working towards. If I'm going to go to the team and say we need to go find $3 million in ARR, right, in 2024 and 2025, well, why?" Well, because we want to make sure our company is valued at X, or we want to make sure when we raise our Series C, we are in a great position, right? It's what's wrong with having those level of conversations? So it's very, very important, and that has to happen. I just don't know how. I know I put myself in that employee's shoes, right? I think that's maybe one way to describe it. If I am going to die on the sword every day for a startup, and that's how it is, by the way, working for a startup. You are working, you're putting every hat on, you're cleaning the kitchen. 5 minutes later, you're on the phone selling a deal. A week later, you're implementing. We're in an implementation process with the customer. So if I am going to do that day in and day out, 7 days a week, and sometimes more than 40 hours a week, then what am I doing it for if I don't understand it? And so having tough conversations and being transparent with the team, I can't tell you how valuable it is. And if you can't do it, get comfortable with it.
I'll leave you with this, Omar, and the audience. I've been studying fast growth companies for 4+ years. A lot of my clients are fast growth, and most of them will say it's the most important element in it being transparency. It's just something that keeps people aligned together. It keeps people, increases that sense of ownership around the work, the challenges, the goals in front of them. And I'll leave it with this. I've noticed in many of these interviews that when you do share things that you're afraid to share, that your people are more likely to rally for you than against you. So
100%.
Omar, I appreciate you being here, sharing your insights of leadership and what makes your company successful. And having great people is certainly a part of all of our successes as company leaders.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I can't wait to learn more about the book that you're putting forward.
Wow. Omar was really dialed in today. I really appreciate him talking about the book and the importance of tough conversations. So certainly something I loved him throwing in at the end, and really loved the whole, interview, him talking about the importance of having great people, and how does he hire them? What are some of the things, that the mistakes he's made, and what are the things that are getting in the way? Well, hopefully you can learn from that as well. Retaining great talent is also an important piece to scalability. If you have people going out the door as quick as they come in, it's really hard to maintain the kind of growth you want and the unity across the team. So you want to make sure you're hiring great people, you're also retaining them, and you are being the leader that they want to follow. If you have any questions about that, how we serve, make sure you reach out to me, gene@genehammett.com. That's my email. And when you think about growth and you think about leadership, think of Growth Think Tank. As always, lead with courage. We'll see you next time.